Hey guys, hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new here, welcome to the channel. So y'all, this book, Counting the Cost by Jill Dillard, has been an interesting one. I've actually pretty much listened to it twice at this point, and there's been some really interesting things that I've realized throughout this book. And one of the big things is the way Jim Bob really screwed Jill over, Jill and Derek. And that's one of the things that we're going to focus on today. Is this book basically is Jill's way of kind of explaining to the world how growing up she was kind of duped, and there was no transparency from her parents, especially her dad. How she trusted her parents, like most people do trust their parents. She trusted her parents with everything, signing documents that she had no idea what they were, because she trusted her parents. She trusted her father. And then it kind of came back to bite her in the butt. And her life, basically, they lost job opportunities. They lost opportunities because her dad was not transparent with them. So one of the things that we're going to talk about is later on, after Jill gets married to Derek, and the show is now called Jill and Jessa. It's based directly on their life because Josh has done so many things that TLC has dropped. 19 Kids and Counting. The show is based on Jill and Derek and some of the older siblings' life. They are still not getting paid. And they were struggling. I mean, they literally relied on food banks at times, right? They were struggling at times. And how when Jill went back to her dad, can we please be paid? Can we be paid? This is a ministry, Jill. This is a ministry that we are doing the Lord's work. We should not be asked to be paid for this. All the while, Jim Bob was raking in millions of dollars throughout this show. A show that was no longer even focused on his life, but his children's life. He was being paid. They were not being paid, right? At some point later on, the IRS sent a letter to Jill, and that's when she found out that Jim Bob had been reporting that Jill was making money that she was not, in fact, making. She gets a letter from the IRS, and due to Derek's background, he had worked in accounting at Walmart headquarters. He broke it all down, was able to get copies of Jill's taxes that had been filed in previous years. And he realized, oh my goodness, like it's been reported to the IRS that you have made money that you have not made. And when they approached Jim Bob about this, he basically said, well, I raised you, Jill. So let's just say such and such amount of money, $3 a day times 8 years is blah, blah, blah amount of money. So we allotted a certain amount of money that it took to raise you guys. And that's basically what we were claiming as your income. I'm sorry. Like, I know you can claim expenses for your children on your taxes. Like, as they're growing up, you can claim uniforms, you can claim childcare. But when they're grown, you cannot say that you are paying them for a job when in reality, you are not paying them for a job. You are basically keeping the money to pay yourself back for the money that you put out while you were raising them. So what I did, you guys, is I got a whole lot of notes here. It's excerpts from the book throughout the chapters of how Jill was explained that this show, what this show was for them, and why she never in a million years thought that, what she always thought the luxuries that came with being on the show, despite the fact that they weren't being paid, there were luxuries that came along with it. Traveling, going to meet Derek for the first time in Nepal. Like those were things that was covered by the network or by the show, So she always thought that was the show, and Pops, as she calls Jim Bob, she thought this was them being generous to her and giving these things to her. Come to find out, it was not that at all. He was not being generous. He was actually taking note of every little thing that he did for his family and his children. So later on, he could reimburse himself essentially. So we're going to go over these notes, you guys, and I got it all like, what chapter you can find it is. And then we're actually going to listen to the part in the article where Jill Duggar realizes that her dad has actually claimed income for her and told the claimed income with the IRS saying, "Yeah, we pay her this amount," but it was really him paying himself back for the food and everything. Harps when they were children. You got a new harp when you were 10 years old. You got the car that we bought you, the Honda Pilot that we got you when you were 16. Like that cost this. The debit card that we gave you when you were 16 and you would take the kids to doctor's appointments and y'all would stop and get food. That like he literally reimbursed himself for everything, but in turn acted like it was him paying Jill. It's the craziest thing, and honestly, I would have to imagine it's some sort of like tax fraud. I mean, I don't know, but I would have to imagine that it is. Okay, so let's get into this, you guys. So in chapter 2 is kind of where it starts. Before that, chapter 1 and all of that, it's kind of Jill. Before the show was picked up, when they were just before the show came. So in chapter 2 is called A Window of Opportunity That God Has Given Us, okay? So Jill discusses how the show first affected the family. She says the first memory that she has of how being on the show gave them some sort of perks was when they were shooting the first documentary. It was 14 kids and counting. The first or 14 kids and pregnant is what I think it was. And this was just a documentary. It was not the reality show. It was a documentary or a docuseries. She said the show wanted to film us going to the store and buying groceries. So that's what we did. We loaded up and we went to go buy groceries. And I actually found the video. You can actually still find it. The clip is still up. Let's see. So the show wanted to, see them go buy groceries. However, once they got there, Jill said she heard one of the ladies say that TLC was going to foot the bill for, the groceries, that this was going to be, their way of kind of paying the family or whatever. They were going to foot the bill for the groceries. So Jill said that this was the first time that Michelle said, you guys can get kind of whatever you want. She said, so we were happy. We were ecstatic. Like for the first time, we were getting ice cream sandwiches. We were getting Lucky Charms. We were getting honeycomb cereal, frozen pizzas, things that we normally didn't get. So Jill said that normally they would get canned beans, ramen noodles, 48 cents beef and bean burritos. All right, so here's like a little shot of the family on 14 children and pregnant of them shopping. And they're filling their carts up. But the only thing is they don't tell us on the show that they're not paying for this. They're actually making it out like this is their regular shopping trip, that they're buying groceries. This is the groceries they normally get. But in reality, this is TLC saying, load up with what you guys want. We're going to pay the tab. Let's see. All right. So there they are, stocking up. I don't even know what that is. But you do see later on, like them putting pizzas in the thing. Like you see a lot of stuff that I was like, wow, like that I can understand like how they normally wouldn't get this, right? So Jill said when the filming crew left, the family would go back to their meals of bean sandwiches, tuna fish sandwiches, the casserole, whatever that famous casserole is that they do, and macaroni and cheese. She said so she realized the perks early on, that there were perks that came along with being on the show. So 14 children pregnant went on to be number 1 on the Discovery Channel. So of course they wanted to come back to do another docuseries. Jim, Bob, and Michelle told the kids that this was going to be their ministry. This was their way to show the world about Christ, about Jesus. Teach them that children are a blessing and that it's not all hard, that while it can be hard, it's doable. You can do it and you should listen to God and you should, let God be the full leader in your life. Have as many children as you want and that it's possible. You know what I'm saying? So Jim Bob told the children this was their ministry to teach the world. The third Duggar special showed the Duggar family moving into the big house, okay? So the third Duggar special would be 17, the 17th kid and counting. Now, the show wanted them to be either moved in by the time they started filming or moving in. But that wasn't going to be what it was because Jim Bob had kind of hit like a point where he could not afford to continue. This was going to be like a project that was supposed to be like a year to build a big house, but it took longer than that. Jim Bob and his kids built the entire house. But as far as like supplies and tools and things that they needed, he kind of ran into like a point where he could not afford it for a minute. So because the network wanted them to be moving into the big house or in the big house, the network put out their checkbook and said, "We will finish the expense of building the house. That way, you guys can be in it." So this was another perk that Jill noticed was that the network paid for them to finish building the house. Not only that, but they flew in an interior designer from New York who took the kids out shopping to choose their own bedroom furniture. So once again, a perk that Jill recognized. She's like, even being like 17, 16, whatever old I was, I remembered the perks. She said after that, so she was 16. She said after that, Jim Bob referred to them as a filming family. She said it made sense because, well, we were a family in everything that we did. And now we were filming. So we were a filming family. It made sense. She said she was used to the cameras at this point. She felt that this was a God ordained ministry, like she was told by her parents. That's what her parents told her. That's what she believed. Now, when Jim Bob negotiated the reality TV show, 17 Kids and Counting, he told the network that they would take it as long as their faith would not be taken out. Right? Which, once again, made Jill believe in what they were doing. Like, this was not a thing. This was not them about money. She's like, Pops wasn't about money. He didn't care about money. Like, yes, it helped us, but Pops was about, spreading the word of the gospel. That's why he wanted to do this. He made sure when he negotiated the reality show that they would not take our religious beliefs out of it, that our faith would be broadcasted. That's the only reason that he took it, right? Now, they did 5 documentaries, but it was shot over the course of 3 years. So it was spanned out a little bit more. But when they signed on for the reality show, it was more, they were there more. Like, it was only shot, this reality show was shot over the course of a couple months, whereas the docuseries was shot over years. So the crew was there, every so often. When it turned into the reality show, they were there for like 3 months almost every day. She said throughout that, when the reality show filming started, the family got to go on trips to New York, driving up to Ohio. They did a lot of things that once again she saw the perks. But she thought this was, the network being generous, Pops being generous with when he would buy them things. She said our Christmas presents got better. We got better Christmas gifts. We got better food. And I just thought, wow, Pops is so generous. So once again, the network paid for the groceries. When they would be there late at night, the network would pay for dinner. Like, they would send somebody out to get dinner for the full family. So Michelle and the kids didn't have to cook. The older kids were given debit cards. And this is the reason, though. This is the reason the older kids were given debit cards. These older kids did a lot. They took the smaller kids on doctor's appointments because Michelle had 5 or 6 smaller kids. So say the 6-year-old had a dentist appointment. Well, Josh or Jill or Jana could get in the van and take one of the kids to the dentist appointment. And Jill said before we had the show, when we would go to appointments and stuff, we would literally carry a crock pot of like chili with us. So we could eat, throughout the day when we were attending to appointments. She said, but now, like, the older kids would take one of the little kids on their appointments, and we were given a debit card where we paid for our food. And when we got back, we gave Pops our receipt. Remember that. Out and about, because you're taking your little sibling to a dentist appointment or a doctor's appointment, or you're taking yourself to a dentist appointment or a doctor's appointment. So you're given a debit card where you can afford to get your food. You come back, you give Jim Bob the receipt. Now, as time went on, though, the kids grew curious about the show and the money that it was bringing them in. Jill says that Jim Bob would answer any questions about the show, that he was happy to. However, he would not answer questions about money. Jill says she noticed more and more perks from the show. Jim Bob actually started a car lot for Josh. He funded that car lot. And then he would still go to auctions, Jim Bob would, and buy cars at auctions, bring them back and put them on Josh's car lot, and he would sell them so he would continue to make money. He also got back into real estate, purchasing and flipping homes, once again as a way to bring in money. Now, when he started with some of these houses, though, he would allow family member and friends to live in these houses either for free or for very cheap rent. Once again, Jill thinks, wow, my pops is so generous. Here we are. We have this opportunity where we get to minister to the world through this show, and he's making money clearly. But he's using this money to buy houses to put our family and friends in that are suffering financially. What a great guy Pops is, right? 5 years after the first documentary, Jim Bob goes on The View, the show The View. He tells the family that when he was flying over New York City, it hit him how much reach their ministry had and that they were doing really good in the world. He knew what the views were for the show, and he felt like they were doing great with their show. Now, chapter 3, it's called Clipped Wings and Hills to Die On. So this is where Jill starts her relationship with Derek. Derek is on a mission in Nepal. They have this relationship over the phone, but at one point she wants to go to Nepal to meet Derek. So she calls the producer and she says, listen, I know once I call my producer and tell my producer that I'm talking to a guy and that I'm interested in this guy, there's no going back from this. Like, he's going to want in on it. But I knew that this would be the only way that I would get to Nepal to see Derek, was if the network footed the bill. So I decided to trade, she's like, I decided to trade my privacy in this relationship for the show. She's like, I knew once I called him, it could not be undone. It could not be unsaid. He was going to know about me and Derek, and he was going to want to film that. She said she called him. She called the producer and said, I've met a guy. He's on a mission in Nepal. And the producer's like, great. When can we go? I want it, let's go. And she's like, listen, I'm down to go. She said, however, if I meet him and we don't get along and he's not the one, can we not air it? Because I don't want to put him through that. I don't want to put this guy through him being on the show if he's really not going to be a part of my life. And the producer's like, nope. If you film it, if we're going to waste the time, resources, and money to get there, we have to film this regardless. So Jill was like, okay. So they went to Nepal, which the bill was footed by the network. Once again, Jill thought, wow, this is so generous of them. But she also felt like they are getting something from me that I'll never be able to take back. They are getting, my relationship is entertainment for the world to see now. So it was kind of like a trade-off, But she was thankful. She was grateful. Now we're going to fast forward to the day before Jill's wedding. So the day before Jill's wedding, her and Derek, they did have a little moment alone where they went to Chick-fil-A and they fed each other nuggets. And then after that, she had to race back to the house to move some of her stuff into the house that her and Derek would be moving into. When she was there, she said it was craziness. They were getting ready to go to the rehearsal dinner. So it was craziness. She said she also knew that the big network executives were coming into town. So there was some paperwork that needed to be finished. And Jim Bob was on a crunch to get that finished. She said as she was running around trying to get her things moved, Jim Bob approaches her and tells her that there's a paper that he needs her to sign. And she asked what the papers were for. She's like, well, what is it for? And he says, oh, it's just about how, everybody's going to be paid. Now, mind you, she has not been paid at this point. However, she's about to get married. So she thinks, well, maybe I will get paid. I'm about to be an adult. I'm about to move into my own house. This is, maybe I will be paid. She says she never thinks anything else of it. Her dad hands her one piece of paper. It's just a bottom half of a paper with her siblings' names on it. Some siblings have already signed the paper. Granted, she don't know exactly what she's signing. Her dad tells her, oh, it's just something about you guys getting paid, So she signs it. She says, this was my dad. I trusted him. Granted, I couldn't see anything else of what this document consists of. I'm just seeing my other siblings' signatures on it, but I trust my dad. So I sign it and I continue on moving my stuff and getting to my rehearsal dinner. Now, chapter 4. This is her wedding once again. She says there was a lot of noise surrounding my wedding because it was filmed. because production had to do things their way. She said there were things at her wedding that she wanted to do a particular way, but production was like, we can't do that. Like in particular, she wanted everybody that took photos at her wedding, she wanted her guests to be able to take photos. And after the wedding, download this app where they could send her the photos. That way she would have copies of all the photos that were taken. And production was like, we can't do that. Nobody can take photos at your wedding. Nobody. They wanted cameras were not even allowed in. Nobody. We cannot have a photo of your wedding leak because your wedding. We have to have professional photographers take the photos. We're selling the photos to People Magazine. They have the rights to your wedding and the photos to your wedding. So once again, this was a trade-off. She's like, they paid for my wedding, so because of that, that's what I did. I gave up some of what I wanted in turn to get my wedding paid for. But once again, I felt it was generous. She was thankful. And she said, after all, this was a part of being a Duggar on TV. She knew this was what she was supposed to do. Now, and she said she knew she would have never afforded, this wedding otherwise. So she is grateful for the things that she has gotten from the show. It was a trade-off. Now, of course, the show wanted to film Jill and Derek's honeymoon, but she said this was a trade-off she was not willing to make, which meant the network, they closed their pocketbook to them. If they would not film it, the network or Jim Bob would not pay for it. So she said, we didn't have a lot of money. We had just a couple $100 like in an account. So they went off on a very short honeymoon, not that extravagant, but that was the trade-off once again. For them to have their privacy on their honeymoon, they knew they weren't going to be able to get like a luxurious honeymoon, but it didn't matter to them. She was like, she did just want like a private honeymoon. So that's what they got. She also said when Josh and Anna went off on their honeymoon, the network paid for it and they filmed, and she didn't like the way they portrayed Josh and Anna as two like dumb, immature virgins who looked like they were just so anxious to get to the bedroom. She was like, I did not want them to portray me and Derek as that, so we decided for a less extravagant honeymoon in turn for privacy. Now, after the marriage, they moved into a home that Jim Bob had owned. Jill started going to school to be a midwife. Derek got a job at Walmart headquarters where he did accounting. And because she went to school during the day for like midwifery and Derek had a job, a 9-to-5 job, 8-to-5 job, whatever, they were still filming. Okay. So what would happen is in the evenings after Derek got home, he would come in, eat a quick bite, change clothes, and they would run to the shop in front of the big house because Jim Bob turned that into a filming studio for them to do their like confessionals or like narrating over the show. And they lived about 30 minutes from there, right? So they had to, after Derek got off work, 5:30, he raced home, ate, changed clothes, and they would race back to work for the show. Now, Jill said sometimes it'd be quite irritating because the network would be on them. Like, come on, guys, you guys got to hurry. She said sometimes Derek would barely make it in the door and they would be calling, come on, you guys got to hurry, you guys got to hurry. She said there was a part of her that wanted to be like, we're volunteers, like, leave us alone. Like, we'll get there when we get there. And sometimes they would film until midnight, despite the fact that Derek had to work the next day. She said we would literally film until midnight and we were like, we're volunteers. However, she says that she did not say anything about them being volunteers because she wasn't even for sure if they knew that, because Jim Bob had always instructed them not to talk about the show and the inner workings of the show and who was paid, who wasn't paid, how much money was made, how much it wasn't made. They were told not to discuss that with anybody. So she really didn't even know if the crew knew that they were just volunteers. Now we're on to chapter 5. Jill and Derek went on a mission in El Salvador. The two stayed, the apartment that the two stayed in obviously did not have a lot, no heat, air conditioner, no, hot water, no stove, la-di-da-di-da. This mission trip was funded by donations that was donated to the ministry, to Derek's ministry. And that's kind of how they made it over there. They lived off those donations. Now, while on the mission, the show got canceled. The 19 Kids Accounting or whatever got canceled. So Jim Bob and the network, like 2 months later, decided to do the Jill and Jessa show. And Jill says in the book, she said basically it was the same show. Like everybody that was involved is involved again, but it's just now around the older kids' lives. Me and Jessa, some of the older kids. But because of that, Jill and Derek would have to leave El Salvador every couple of months and go back home for filming. At one point, Jill and Derek decided to ask Jim Bob if they would at least start getting paid since the show was focused more on their lives. Now, here's the thing. They are living off donations that people are paying into a ministry. Granted, they're living in a very cheap, like where they live, things are very cheap, but still, this is a newly married couple, basically. I guess there's about a year into it, but they're literally flying back and forth to do this show. That's literally, it's her namesake. You know what I'm saying? And she's not getting paid. So, rightfully so, they decide, hey, maybe we should ask Pops about us getting paid. So they do. Derek asked Pops when they flew in one time to film for the show about them getting paid. Jim Bob answers Derek like this. Listen, Derek, from the beginning, we have viewed this show as a ministry. In the beginning, we did not even get paid. Later, I worked out a deal with the network. I could retire right now. The only reason I'm still doing this is for you kids. Derek asked if maybe they could just receive a percentage of something. Jim Bob told them that Michelle was the one that had all these kids. So that if anybody deserved to be paid, it was her. And that it would not be like the show if it wasn't for her because they wouldn't even exist. Derek said yes, that was true. He says, but we've brought a lot of value to the show too. And Jill says she knew like some of the things that Derek would bring up, like the fact that their wedding brought in was huge for ratings. Their wedding was I think it's still like today is like one of the top viewed episodes of the show was their wedding. Jim Bob says everyone pulls their weight on the show. That at one point it may seem like it's focused more on Jill and Derek and they're pulling more weight, but eventually it will even out and Jessa and Ben will be filming a little bit more than Jill and Derek. So everybody pulls their weight. Obviously, Derek's still kind of persistent. We definitely think that we deserve something because we do think we bring value to the show. And Jim Bob asked Derek, well, how much do you think you and Jill are worth? And Derek says, well, how much is the show worth? Because I can't tell you how much worth we bring to the show without knowing how much the show is actually worth. Which was a question that Jim Bob did not really like. He did not like Derek really questioning him. Once again, Jim Bob went back to the church is a ministry to reach out to people in the world, to tell them about the Lord. He then tells Jill and Derek that their show reaches more people than Jill and Derek do out on the mission field. He's like, we do more work from our show than you guys do out on the mission field. Now, the crew goes, Jill and Derek, they go back to El Salvador. And it was very dangerous in the area that they were living in. And a lot of there were gangs over there. And members of these gangs would leave the gangs and join the church. But it put them in grave danger because if the gangs would actually allow people to leave to join the church, but if they found out that these ex-members were not really going to church and staying involved in the church, they would find them and kill them. So it was very dangerous over there where they were. So Jill and Derek ended up hiring a guard to stand outside their home in El Salvador. The network even took out ransom insurance on them because if those gangs found out who you were and thought that you were worth a lot of money, they would kidnap you and ask for ransom. So they were kind of concerned about that. Also, at this point, Jill was pregnant. So they were kind of worried about putting themselves in danger. Now, we're at the beginning of Jill and Jessa. They're still not getting paid. Jill and Derek made a commitment that they would stay in El Salvador for several months without flying back to the States, which they thought was fine because they didn't think that they had any filming to do. And earlier in their mission, they were flying back to the States every few, weeks or whatever, which the guy over the mission in El Salvador was like, we really need you guys here to be consistent. Like, once we get over this hump, can you guys commit to staying here for, like, I want to say it may have been like a year that he wanted, or maybe like 6 months. But he wanted them to stay nonstop without up and leaving every few months or a few weeks. And they were like, yes, we can. Let us get over this hump and we will commit to staying here and not flying back for a while. And this was going to be like between seasons, right? So that's what they thought that were going to happen. However, before season 2 started, the network wanted Jill and Derek to fly back to the States to film some promotional footage for the new season. So they've been in El Salvador for a few months, not having to fly back. However, before season 2 airs, they want them to come back. Jill and Derek, they're like, we can't. We told you guys that we committed to El Salvador and that we told the mission that we were not going to be leaving for a while. So we can't come back. The network was not happy about this and told them that they had to fly in to film this promotional footage. Derek told the network that Jill was not going to be flying in, that he nor Jill was going to be flying in because she was nothing more than a volunteer. And they could not make her fly in. She was just a volunteer. And so they're speaking to a man named Chad, who is, high up in the network, but he is like Jim Bob's right-hand man through the network. Everybody deals with Chad, right? So Derek tells Chad, listen, she's not coming in. We already told the mission that we would not be flying out anymore. And that's what we're not going to. We made them a commitment and we're not going to break our commitment. And Chad's like, well, y'all also committed to us, the network, for the show when y'all signed on for a second season. And Derek's like, yeah, we did, but we also said that we weren't going to fly back before we were due to, and we're not technically due to. And he's like, this is something that just popped up that you guys are throwing at us. Like, we don't have to do this. We're volunteers. And Chad informed them that Jill was obligated by contract that she had signed, which was the first that Jill and Derek heard about this. Derek gets off the phone and he's like, do you know anything about a contract? Chad is saying you signed a contract. Jill's like, no, I've never signed a contract. I don't know what they're talking about. So they email Chad and they're like, we need to see a copy of any contract that Jill may have signed. Chad emailed Derek back a list of obligations that Jill were legally binded to within this contract. He did not send her a copy of the contract. He just emails and says, well, this is what the contract binds Jill to. This, which was a shock because they're like, we still don't know. Where's the contract? We want to see the contract. This was the first that Jill learned about the contract, though. She told Derek that, as far as she knew, her dad handled all the paperwork. Her dad handled everything with the network. That she knew nothing about any sort of contract. So move on to chapter 6. They do not fly in for the promotional footage. They stand their ground on that. But months later, when they are over their commitment to El Salvador and not flying back, they do fly back to Arkansas. Now, weeks before they flew back, Jill finally got a little screenshot of a copy of the 2014 contract that Chad had mentioned. She got just a little screenshot of it. She said it was the paper that she signed the day before her wedding. She said she was shocked that this was a contract that obligated her to anything, that tied her to the show, because she had no idea. She said she signed it the day before her wedding. She said it left her feeling tricked. She said that contract obligated her for things that she may not would have agreed to had she read it, had she known about it, But she had no choice because Jim Bob didn't even tell her really what it was. Now, a couple of months later, Jim Bob calls a meeting. This was in August. This is 13 years after they have started filming. 13 years, okay? he calls a meeting with the older kids where he tells them that, they are adults. And this is just the adults that are, married and stuff. He tells them that he is going to give each one of the kids, older kids, $80,000. And he tells the kids that they can use this money to start their lives, start businesses, invest it in some way. And then he says, and you guys can thank Derek for this because he was actually the one that convinced me to do this. Now, the thing about it was, though, he says, everybody can get their $80,000, but before you get it, I need you guys to sign some paperwork that I'm having drawn up right now. So in a couple of days, you guys can come back to the big house, sign the paperwork, and I'll write your check for you. Which Jill and Derek, it got them to thinking. They leave the big house on their way home. They're talking about it. They're like, what's the deal with this? Like, is this a gift? Is he just giving this as a gift? Is he giving this as payment for past episodes? Like, what is this $80,000? And what is he going to try to get us to sign to collect this $80,000? They didn't feel good about it. The contract ended up coming in. Jill and Derek studied it. It was a 4-page agreement, not with TLC, not with the network, but with Mad Company Inc. Mad Company Inc. was the mom and dad, Jim, Bob, and Michelle, their company. Mad Inc. is their company, Jim Bob's company, for everything that they do, right? It was not even with the network. So Jim Bob had his kids sign a contract with him if they wanted this $80,000. So Jill and Derek, they made sure they took this contract to their lawyer. They sat down with their lawyer and they looked it over. And their lawyer basically explained to them that in return for the $80,000, they were signing away the next 7 years of their life plus an unlimited amount of years beyond that if the company chose for them to continue filming beyond 7 years. They would have to commit themselves, any children that they have now, or any future children to any show that Mad Inc. created. They would also be paid for their work with Mad Inc. in any future shows at a rate that Mad Inc. decided without any negotiations. Now, this is 7 years plus any, let me see how it was worded. Let me see. It was a 4-page agreement with Mad Inc. In return for the $80,000, they had to make themselves available for the next 7 years, plus an unlimited amount of years beyond that. If the company chose, they would have to commit themselves and their current children and any future children available to any show that Mad Inc. created. They would also be paid, but at a rate that Mad Inc. decided without negotiation, as well as sign an NDA that will remain active for their entire life. Of course, Jill said her and Derek knew what the answer would be. Without even discussing, they knew this was not going to be something that they signed. A month later, they decided to ask Jim Bob to send the full 2014 contract. Derek actually told Jim Bob that Jill could not agree to a contract if she wasn't even aware to what she was signing. Jim Bob knew that Jill and Derek were not okay with signing the contract because time went on and all the other kids were signing their contracts and sending them in, but Jill and Derek were not. And some of them didn't. There were other kids that made revisions to it, but Jill and Derek was like, mm-mm. Every time they talked to Jim Bob, they was like, listen, we want a copy of the 2014 contract. We want a copy of the 2014 contract. We want a copy of the 2014 contract. Oh, that's wild, all apologies. That is wild. So Jim Bob was getting pushed, and he knew he was getting backed into a corner because his 2014 contract was something that I don't think he wanted them to see. So he showed up at their house one day, him and Michelle, and said, listen, we've been thinking, long and hard about this, and we feel so bad about how everything's played out. So we've decided we're just going to give you guys the $80,000. Jill, we're just going to give you the $80,000. And if you decide to sign the contract later on, that's fine. If you don't, no big deal. We're just going to give you the 80 grand. So they give her the 80 grand. Jill and Derek, they go back out onto the mission field for the remainder of their mission. And when they go back, at this point now they have a child. So Jim Bob, the house that they lived in, like I said, did not have a stove, did not have like heating or nothing like that. So when they went back, Jim Bob paid to install, a refrigerator, a stove, heating and air, like hot water system in their house in El Salvador, which they thought, once again, wow, Pops feels really bad about duping Jill into signing this contract. And now he's trying to make up for it by being super generous. Sometime later, they returned back to the States after their mission in El Salvador was complete. When they came back, they had about $1,500 in their account. They had been living off, the donations that was funded for the mission, as well as the 80 grand that Jim Bob had given them. But they're also trying to prepare for their life, when they go back home. Mind you, she's had a child as well that they've had to pay, the medical bills for her to have her child. So years later, Jill and Derek was back in the States living in their own house. They received a letter from the IRS. Jill read it. Well, Derek read it because he had previously worked in accounting at Walmart headquarters. So before sending it to Jim Bob's CPA, because that's who handled Jill's taxes. All these years, Jill's taxes were handled by Jim Bob's CPA. And she said, normally that's what I would do. I get something in the mail from IRS, I send it straight to my dad's CPA. But this time, she said Derek wanted to look it over. He has like a little bit of background in this, so he wanted to look it over. When he looked it over, he quickly realized that it was something that he did not like, you know. So she said, Derek basically told her, from what I can see, it's saying that, the IRS is saying that you claimed an income from the show. And Jill's like, well, that's crazy because I wasn't paid from the show. I mean, aside from this 80 grand that we really don't know what it was for, if it was a gift, if it was payment for the show, like, I don't know. So Derek reached out, rather than reaching out to Jim Bob, Derek reached out directly to the CPA. I was like, hey, can you send me a copy of all of Jill's tax returns for the past few years since she's been on the show? So the CPA did just that. He sent a copy of the tax returns. Jill says she doesn't even think the CPA knew that what was being filed was incorrect because he seemed completely okay with it. Like if he would have known that they were filing money as an income for her that she really wasn't getting, then she feels like he would have been a little hesitant to send her those copies of her returns. But he wasn't. He's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So the CPA sends Jill and Derek copies of all their tax returns. Derek works out this big spreadsheet, and he ends up realizing that, sure enough, the IRS believed that Jill had been paid $130,000 more than she actually was. She was only paid that 80 grand at one point, but the IRS had her at an income of $130,000 more than just the 80 grand, which is, $210,249.98. So, Jill and Derek reached out to Jim Bob about this. However, though, Jim Bob dodged the discussion of what the IRS letter showed, and that she was making more money than she was. Jim Bob was not happy, but he dodged the question about the money. Jill and Derek pushed Jim Bob over the next few months to answer the question of why it was reported that she made an income that she did not make. But Jim Bob would not give them answers. So they decided they were not going to be around. They avoided any get-togethers at the big house. They avoided any get-togethers at friends' house. They stopped hanging out with the Duggars at all. Every so often, emailing Jim Bob again. Please send me a copy of the 2014 contract. Please send me a copy of any other contracts that I've signed. Any other agreements that I may have signed, I need to see them. Please send me the money that I'm owed. because you have reported. And then they started asking for that. They're like, send me the money that I'm owed. You guys reported that I made this money. I should be making this money. So that's what they started demanding from Jim Bob through emails. Like, listen, we're not well. We think we need to do therapy. But in the meantime, this is what we need: the copy of that contract, any other contracts, and then that money. They ended up talking to their pastor at their church, and the pastor suggested that they do like a little um, get together with a mediator. Like, why don't you guys get a mediator together and have a discussion with your parents and tell your parents how you feel? So that's what they did. They got a mediator through their church, sat down with Jim, Bob, and Michelle, and it did not go good. That was the big argument that we've already talked about, because in one of the emails where they asked for the contracts and for the payment, Jill basically said, like, you've verbally abused me, and I don't like it. So it was at this meeting that Jim Bob demanded that Jill apologize for calling him verbally abusive. When Jim Bob realized that she was not going to apologize, he, stood up and was like yelling at her. And she ended up saying, you know what, Dad? You want to know why I'm crying? I'm crying because you treat my pedophile brother better than you treated me. That meeting did not go as planned. And it definitely did not get to the point to where they once again got to ask him about the contracts and the money. So they went their separate ways. Weeks later, hold on. Oh, I missed a part, you guys. They actually hired an attorney. Did I not write that down? Or did I skip that? They actually hired a lawyer. Derek and Jill hired a lawyer. And their lawyer started reaching out to Jim Bob, demanding these contracts, demanding that Jim Bob write Jill a check for the amount that was reported to the IRS. Basically saying, like, if you don't do this, like, we will go forward with our next steps. That threw Jim Bob into a tizzy, sending messages, emails, like, don't do this, like, what is wrong with you guys? Her siblings started coming over, like, oh, you're going to cause everybody to get sued. Like, what are you doing? What's wrong with y'all? So they literally hired an attorney. Jim Bob ever so often would email saying, let's handle this, between us. Let's not get lawyers involved. And they were like, no, we already tried to do that. We have literally for months asked this for you, and you haven't wanted to do it. So now you can speak with our lawyer about this. So later on, Jim Bob actually emailed Jill and Derek, apologizing to them over the years, saying that he has made a lot of mistakes and that he is sorry for those mistakes. Jill thought, oh, great. Like, maybe he's finally going to admit his wrongdoing and set everything straight, give me the contracts that I need, and pay me what I'm owed. Which in reality, she's owed a lot more, because they did end up getting like all the documents from, they did end up seeing the contracts, and Jim Bob made like millions of dollars over the course of the show. So she definitely would have made more. Either way. Further in the email, though, he tells Jill that yes, there was money reported to the IRS as the company paid her. However, this was money that Jill had spent over the years. This was expenses for her upkeep over the years. He says, yes, we allotted at different times money to our children for tax purposes because each one of our children benefited from having their needs met: food, clothing, shelter, utilities, music lessons, education, travel, instruments, medical bills, etc. So this is what he's saying. He said, yes, we told the IRS that we paid you guys, but really, we were basically paying ourselves back for all the money that we put out while raising you guys. Here's what I got to say about that. You don't reimburse yourself for the food that you pay for your kids. If you put your kids in music lessons, that's money that you're out. They didn't ask for that. And even if they did, you could say, no, we can't afford it. Or do you plan on paying me back when you get older and you have an income? Oh, you're going to pay me back? Okay, then great. Yes, sure, we'll put you in music lessons. No. Shelter? Really? You're going to charge them rent for the time? And he did. Because mind you, these girls, they live in the house with Jim, Bob, and Michelle until they get married and then they move out. He actually charges Jill for like from the time that she was like 10 to 18 living in the house. Utilities, a portion of the utilities. Medical insurance. It is a parent's job to maintain insurance on their children. You're not supposed to get that back. You know what I'm saying? Like, what? Then he says, here are some low numbers on what was approximately spent on Jill over the last few years. Apartment rent. Mind you, she lived at home. $750 for 24 months, $18,000. Utilities, $600 for 36 months, $21,600. Midwife education, $5,000. Honda Pilot, $9,000. A harp, $15,000. Furniture, $5K. If you don't want the furniture, we will buy it back in 4 years for $3K. Now, this was, I guess, when she moved into her, I think this was El Salvador, maybe. I guess, I don't know what furniture they paid for. But here's the thing, if you're going to buy somebody something as a gift, how about you let them know that you're going to require them to pay you back? Exactly. Elle, I would be rolling in the dough if I charged my kids. Paris is 18. She'd already be like, okay, pay me back. You know what I'm saying? Like, what? Let's see. Cell phone, $50 times 120 months, $6,000. Car insurance, $50 times 8 years, $4,800. Vehicle fuel, $50 times 8 years, $4,800. Eating out with a family debit card. Mind you, this is her going to appointments when she's a teen, taking other children to appointments. $100 a month for 8 years, $9,600. Clothes on the family debit card over the course of 8 years, from 10 to 18. $1,000 a year for 8 years, $8,000. Eating at home, $8 a day times 12 years, $13,140. Gift to Dillard Ministries, to Dillard Family Ministries. So they did donate to Derek and Jill's ministry. They donated $10,000. Guaranteed you they wrote that off on their taxes though. You know they wrote that 10K off on their taxes. But they say when you guys came home, you had approximately $1,500 in your bank account. So that shows that you did spend the money from Dillard Family Ministries that we paid you guys. If you would like, you can write us a check for the $10,000 and we can write you a check back directly to you guys. This is $129,940, which is just the beginning of Jill's expenses over the past few years because these were low figures. Most of this was spent on Jill before you guys were even married. Also, take into account that we spent money to help y'all installing the AC, the stove, and the washing machine in y'all's home in El Salvador. Jim Bob then offered to write them a check for $20,000 to settle this once and for all. He also reminded Jill that once him and Michelle pass away, that Jill is set to inherit 1/19 of everything that they own. But if she attacks them, her inheritance will be cut down significantly. He tells her the 20K is a one-time offer. She has 24 hours to decide, and after that, the offer will go away. Jill says that hurt her to learn that all this time she thought her dad was being generous, but he was not. Isn't that wild? Let's listen to Jill. Let's see. We're going to listen to Jill kind of read some of this. It's wild to find out that this man, when she was 10 years old, started keeping tabs of the money that he spent on her. I mean, what if she would not have went on to, what if she would have went on to work at a grocery store or be a midwife? Was he going to charge her and send her a bill every month to pay him back her expenses from when she was a child? Hold on, let me see.
Back when Derek had enrolled at Oklahoma Therapist Advice, I explained that we felt like we needed some more time to work on ourselves.
Hold on. Okay. So here's the thing, too, is the reason why they really wanted to be paid that money that it claimed that she made through the IRS is because Derek was trying to enroll in school. Derek was trying to go to school to become a lawyer. You know, he was trying to go. but they could not get grants. He could not get any type of grants or anything because him and Jill was married. And according to the IRS, they didn't need any grants. According to the IRS, it looked like they had a decent income. Okay, so let's see. Hold on. So that was another reason why they were asking for the money. They're like, listen, we can't even get grants for Derek to go to school. Because we don't qualify, because it looks like we make a bunch of money. So all right, let's listen to this.
But there was one issue that we couldn't put on hold indefinitely: money. Back when Derek had enrolled at Oklahoma State University as a teenager, his mom and dad had given him some great advice. Apply for every grant, every scholarship possible. He did exactly what they said and sent out almost 100 letters, applications, and essays to various boards and nonprofits and foundations that he had a chance of receiving financial aid from.
So this is him obviously wanting to go to law school. And Jill explains, she's like, I'm not trying to be greedy. I'm really not. But you guys, Jill on a TV show that raked in millions of views, you would think that they would have money. But they literally had to depend on food banks at times. That's not okay. While Jim Bob is buying houses and letting friends and family live in them for free.
Then they started rolling in, including $20,000 from OSU, nearly $10,000 from the Buck Foundation, and $1,000 from the local Walmart neighborhood market. He ended up getting almost half his cost covered, saving himself tens of thousands of dollars over the course of his degree. Naturally, when he enrolled in law school over a decade later, Derek took the same approach. With 2 kids under 4 at home and a wife who wasn't working, money was even tighter than it had been before. He needed all the grants he could get, so he began applying. It didn't take long for him to realize that all the money that Pops' accountant had declared on my tax returns made it look like we had way more cash than we actually did.
So you guys know when you apply for things like that, if it's, and I got to stop every once in a while and commentate, because if not, fair use, whatever. But if it shows that you are making money that you're technically not making, it still affects you. I mean, if they were to try to sign up on food stamps, they're not going to get it, because to the state, it looks like they're making a ton of money.
It didn't actually matter that we'd never actually been paid the $132,249.98, which had been declared. As far as these trusts and foundations were concerned, our tax returns told the story that we didn't need much financial help. While that was frustrating, it wasn't even our biggest worry. We were worried more about what we still didn't know about our finances, the contract, and previous taxes with Pops. We had been pushing Pops to pay us the bare minimum ever since the summer, and we had hoped to reach an agreement in the mediation session, but we hadn't even discussed it. There had been more follow-up emails and texts. We'd got an email from him a couple weeks later, and as I read the opening lines, I felt genuinely surprised. Jill and Derek, we love...
Okay, so this is where he messages, and she actually thinks, okay, maybe he's had to change of heart, he's apologizing, maybe he's going to do the right thing. They still haven't even seen the contracts.
Both and want to see our differences resolved. I have been praying and fasting about all of this. I need to share my heart with you. I have made some bad decisions along life's way, and have hurt you all. I am sorry about that. I was wrong for things I have said and done, and I pray you will please forgive me. It was a good start. Maybe he had a change of heart, and was actually going to reconcile with us after all. But the further I read, the worse I felt. Yes, we allotted at different times amounts to our children for tax purposes, because each one of our children were benefiting from having all of their needs met: food, clothing, shelter, utilities, music lessons, education, travel, instruments, vehicles, phones, medical insurance, medical bills, etc.
Normally, kids do somehow have their needs met by their parents. You know what I'm saying? I'm just mind blown, honestly. Mind blown.
Here are some low numbers of what was approximately spent on Jill in the last few years. Apartment rate rent, $750 times 24 months equals $18,000.
Mind you, what apartment? She lived at home. So they basically charged her an apartment fee for living at home.
Utilities discounted, $600 times 36 equals $21,600. Midwife education, $5,000. Honda Pilot, $9,000. HARP, $15,000. Furniture, $5,000. If you don't want the furniture, we will buy it back after 4 years of use for $3,000. Cell phone, at $50 times 120 months equals $6,000. Car insurance, $50 per month times 8 years equals $4,800. Vehicle fuel, 8 years times $50 a month equals $4,800.
Mind you, some of that vehicle fuel probably went to running the littles places, running the littles to doctor's appointments, helping her mom go buy groceries, go do this.
Eating out $100 per month with family debit card for 8 years equals $9,600. Clothes and Goodwill on family debit cards, $1,000 per year times 8 years equals $8,000. Eating at home, $3 per day times 12 years equals $13,140. Gift to Dillard Family Ministries, $10,000. You paid yourself a salary from this, stated there was only $1,200 left when you closed it out, so you must have eventually received it. You can refund this ministry gift, and we will give it to you directly if you want us to. $129,940 is just the beginning of Jill's expenses paid by Duggar family over the last several years. Most of this was made and spent on Jill before you two were married. Also taking into account many other ways that we have spent money to help you all. For example, installing the AC in your home to El Salvador, the stove, the washing machine, etc. The total on Jill's tax returns was $130,000.
Yeah, it seems like some sort of tax evasion scheme to me. Because I don't see how you would do that. I'm not. I don't know for sure. But you definitely can't say you're paying somebody when you're not paying them because really you're taking that money and paying yourself back, or you raising them. It doesn't really seem like. Yeah, the family meals parts are funny. I know, right? It's wild. This was one of the things that really shocked me when he came back with this. When his back was up against the wall, and they involve a lawyer and trying to get these contracts, he's like, okay, you know what? Let me settle this. I'm going to tell them, here's all the money that we really spent on you. So this is why we claimed it. Now, you can take the 20K and shut your mouth, or like not, and you're not going to receive your inheritance. Which at this point, there'll probably be nothing left. You know what I'm saying? Like, there'll be nothing left of an inheritance. Did they pay her for being a buddy? Exactly. Did they pay her for being a buddy and cooking and doing laundry and other chores they were all required to do? Exactly. But parents are supposed to take care of their children until they're 18 or 21 at school. They also wouldn't let her go to work so she could babysit for them. Exactly. Exactly. I'm like, let me write you a list of all the hours I put in working for you guys, and I'll send y'all a bill. How about that? From the time I was 5, I then had a buddy that I had to take care of, brush their teeth, brush their hair, fix them breakfast, fix them dinner. Like, it's really wild. But I am looking on Amazon, and right now Jill's book is number 1 on the bestsellers list. Right there. There it is, number 1. It's got 5-star review, and it's only been out less than a week. Wait, no, a week. It's been out exactly a week, and it's on the bestsellers list. So I think this book, that's great for her. I don't think this person, Gwen, understands what really happened here. This book was written well and it's interesting, but why Jill feel the need to give the dish on her parents' fault in the world? Hello? Because her parents' fault has basically condemned her. Like, her parents messing up has condemned her. Like, the world looks at her a certain way too. And it's affected her. Like, they lost on a mission that they applied for a year in advance. It took them a year. But because they could not get that contract, her and Derek lost out on this mission. Also, she does not point out until almost the end of the book that her parents paid for almost everything, even when she moved out of the house. No, they did not. Her parents did not pay for everything when she moved out of the house. That was when she was living in the house, such as her rent, for example. No, they did not. They charged her rent, like Jim Bob said. Most of this is from before she even married you. These girls don't move out until they're married. And then they moved into at first they moved into Grandma Duggar's house, I think it was. Or like a house that Jim Bob owned but didn't charge him anything. So I guess yeah, great for that. But she thought it was him being nice. It was not rent. She was also given a family credit card to use. When she was 16, taking the kids on dentist appointments and trips. This was not for her to use after she got married and moved out of the house. I'm not saying that's adequate compensation for her time on the show, but it should have been mentioned sooner in the book. I think she will regret writing this book. Yes, it does sound like her dad got greedy and exploded his family, but why tell the world? Why not tell the world? Why not tell the world? Just confide in close friends if you want it to be heard and understand. I don't like this comment. That comment ticks me off. Yeah, people love to talk about what they don't know. Exactly. Like clearly, early in the book, she talks about being 16 years old, getting a debit card. She then talks about after her and Derek get married, how they struggled financially because they had no income from the show, and at first only lived off Derek working at Walmart headquarters, and then lived off the ministry funds when they were on their mission trips. They did not have a debit card after she got married and moved out. The debit card was strictly for her there, helping with the family. The big house was rated a few weeks ago. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that it was rated again. Um, I haven't. How did you hear that, Kathy? Anyways, the book is very interesting. Maybe let me see. Oh yeah, that was reported by Without a Crystal Ball. So I don't know about that. Anyways, you guys leave me your thoughts in the comment section below. The book is a good book, not gonna lie. This was one of my Holly Madison. I love her book, Leah Remedy's book, Leah Mester's book, and this. These are like top 4 books that I've read so far. Oh, Jeanette McCurdy, really good book. You guys leave your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you guys think? If anybody knows taxes really well, leave me your thoughts about Jim Bob reporting that Jill Duggar was being paid from the show by Mad Inc. when in reality she was not being paid, and instead this was him paying himself back from taking care of her when she was growing up. What do you guys think about that? Leave me your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, I'm going to try to make time to do some content over on Fatal Files today. We got Corey Richardson, who is in jail for murdering her husband. She allegedly overdosed him, like put some fentanyl in his drink, and he died. Some letters have been discovered in her jail cell where she is basically telling her mom, I need you to get in touch with my brother and tell my brother to say X, Y, and Z to kind of cover for her. So now she's being charged with witness tampering. So we're going to try to cover that over on Fatal Files later today. Also, more content over on Fatal Files today with the Dillard. Is it Dillard? Is that how you say it? I just got into this though. Literally last night, I got sent some documents from the case for those murders. So we're going to try to cover that over on Fatal Files, both of those today. So you guys make sure you are subscribed to that channel over there. I'm so sorry this one took so long. I know, Kathy. The thing is when Katie reported that, media outlets picked it up. Like I see it over here at the Sun. It's reporting it. So anyways, you guys let me your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel. Give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, everyone.